When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. The Air Force Research Laboratory is partnering with Google Cloud using AI to accelerate defense research for air, space, and cyberspace forces. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American innovation.
Hello, and welcome to Novel Conversations, a podcast about the world's greatest stories. I'm your host, Frank Lavallo, and for each episode of Novel Conversations, I talk to two readers about one book. And together, we summarize the story for you. We introduce you to the characters, we tell you what happens to them, and we read from the book along the way. So if you love hearing a good story, you're in the right place. This episode's conversation is about the novel The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, and I'm joined by our Novel Conversations readers, Gregory James and Dallas Stark. Gregory, Dallas, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Happy to be here.
Glad to have you both here for this conversation. Before we get started, though, let me give a quick introduction to our novel. The Secret Garden, the novel by Frances Hodgson Burnett, was first published in 1911. It tells the story of Mary Lennox, a young girl who is sent to live with her uncle in England after her parents die in India. Mary is a spoiled and sickly child, but she begins to thrive after she discovers a hidden garden on her uncle's estate. The Secret Garden is a classic of children's literature and has been adapted numerous times for the stage and screen, including a 1993 film version starring Maggie Smith. So Gregory, our novel starts with an omniscient narrator introducing our main character, our protagonist, but not very charitably.
The narrator of The Secret Garden begins by enumerating the defects of Mary Lennox, the 10-year-old girl who is the novel's protagonist. Mary is ugly, sickly, with skin made yellow by constant illness, and is spoiled rotten. At the outset of the novel, she's living in India with her parents, who have neither the time nor affection for her.
Her mother, who had never wanted a child at all, has entrusted Mary to the care of a number of Indian servants, whose only instructions are to keep the unloved child out of her mother's sight. Mrs. Lennox is described as a famously beautiful, elegant woman who does nothing but attend fashionable parties.
And even though everyone is acquainted with and admires Mrs. Lennox, nearly no one knows that she has a little girl. So totally is the embarrassingly ugly child kept from public view. Mary is thus positioned as the first of the many secrets which animate the novel. She is secreted away from view. The soldiers who discover her at the end of the chapter are shocked to find her and refer to her as the child no one ever saw.
The servants are obliged to give Mary whatever she wants, lest her parents be disturbed by her crying. Mary becomes terribly spoiled, selfish, and dictatorial. She loves no one, and no one cares at all for her. The servants must obey Mary's every wish, and even must withstand her beatings, because they depend upon her parents for their survival. Their disobedience may carry with it the threat of death.
The relationship between the servants and the Lennox family is left largely unexplored, I would argue, by this novel, but I think it implies a great deal about British colonialism in India. The chapter also lays the blame for Mary's flaws at the feet of her parents, particularly her mother. This introduces one of the novel's central themes, the notion that children must be loved if they're to be capable of loving, and given examples of virtue if they're to be virtuous.
This already unhappy state of affairs is made worse when a cholera epidemic breaks out in the Indian village where the Lennoxes are living. The family does not manage to flee in time to escape the epidemic because Mary's mother insisted upon staying to attend a dinner party. On the morning that the cholera finally strikes the Lennox bungalow, Mary's nanny does not come to tend to her. Left utterly unsupervised, Mary wanders into the garden and begins to play by herself beneath a tree.
She overhears a conversation between her mother and a British officer, after which the events of the morning are explained to her. The fact that her ayah, or her nanny, has died of cholera does not bother Mary at all, as she did not love her nanny or anyone else. The household is seized by terror and confusion, and in the ensuing chaos, Mary is completely forgotten. She shuts herself in her room and does nothing but cry and sleep for more than a day. When she finally ventures out, the house seems eerily deserted, as though it has been abandoned. A party of British soldiers finds her there and takes the newly orphaned child away with them.
Mary sent to live with an English clergyman and his family in the period immediately following the death of her parents. She instantly despises the clergyman's 5 children and the poverty of the family's circumstances. They, for their part, are quite frank in their dislike for her, too. They delight in making fun of her, and upon finding her playing at gardening, give her a mocking nickname borrowed from a nursery rhyme, Mistress Mary Quite Contrary.
You know, Gregor, I think even the omniscient narrator seems to approve of this nickname, as it will often refer to Mary in this manner. And of course, Mary amply returns the enmity that is heaped upon her, though hers is predicated in most measure upon class. She despises the family for being poorer than she. She's contemptuous of the clergyman's crowded, untidy bungalow and his children's patched clothes.
Basil, the favorite among the children, informs Mary that she is to be sent to England to live with her uncle, Archibald Craven. As she has heard of neither England nor her uncle, this comes as something of a surprise to her. It's also from Basil that Mary begins to hear the peculiar rumors that surround her uncle. It's said that he's a hunchback and hermit who lives in a mysterious, rambling old house in the middle of nowhere.
You know, I'm glad every time I read this, or even when I first wrote, I was saying Basil. As the Italian in the crowd, right?
Mm-hmm.
I never occurred to me to think of Basil. So outstanding. Anyway.
Basil exposition.
There you go.
A few days later, she does indeed set sail for England. In London, Mary is handed over to Archibald Craven's housekeeper, Mrs. Medlock. The pair loathe each other on sight, a turn of events that is quite common for Mary, whose plain face and bitter disposition seem to impress everyone unfavorably.
The precarious position of servants with regard to their employers is again suggested in this chapter. Mrs. Medlock must miss her niece's wedding in order to pick up Mary. This is, quote, the only way in which she could keep her position, to do at once what Mr. Archibald Craven told her to do, and never dare even to ask a question. Servants, in England as in India, are permitted no freedoms.
Mrs. Medlock and her charge take a train to Yorkshire, the site of Misselthwaite Manor. Mrs. Medlock passes the journey by telling Mary dismal stories about the house and its master. Archibald Craven is indeed a hunchback and a widower. The death of his lovely wife had been, for him, the end of any possibility of happiness. Most of his house's 100 rooms are now kept locked and shuttered. As she slowly falls asleep, her uncle's story seems like a fairy tale, or, quote, like something in a book.
When Mary awakes, the train has arrived in Yorkshire. She and Mrs. Medlock board a carriage there, which takes them through a village and over to Misselmoor, until they finally reach the manor. There, the travelers are greeted by Mr. Pitcher, her uncle's manservant, who tells them that Mr. Craven does not wish to see them. Mrs. Medlock shuts Mary up in a room by herself and reminds her again that she is not to explore the house or its grounds, as Mr. Craven, quote, won't have it.
Martha, one of the manor's numerous maidservants, greets Mary when she awakens on the first morning at Misselthwaite. The housemaid is quite casual in her speech and talks to the girl as though the two were equals. This upsets Mistress Mary, who is used to the extreme servility of the servants who took care of her in India. When Mary asks Martha to help her get dressed, Martha is completely shocked. It had never occurred to her that the child might not be capable of dressing herself.
Mary finds that the mourning black she was wearing upon her arrival at Misselthwaite has been replaced by a new set of white woolen clothes. For once, she's pleased by the change. As she helps Mary dress, Martha is again surprised by the child's behavior. She stands very still, as though she were a doll, and does nothing to help herself. When the maid asks why she insists on being dressed, Mary replies with a phrase she learned from her Indian servants. It was the custom.
Martha begins to tell Mary about her family, her mother, father, and 11 brothers and sisters. She mentions that one of her younger brothers, Dickon, has an almost magical way with animals and keeps a wild pony as a pet. For the first time in her life, Mary finds herself interested in something other than herself. She's attracted by the idea of Dickon.
Mary refuses to eat the breakfast that is brought to her, which exasperates Martha, who has often seen her siblings go hungry. At Martha's suggestion, and in the hopes that she might see Dickon, Mary decides to explore the moor. Before she ventures out, however, Martha mentions that somewhere on the grounds of Misselthwaite there is a garden that has been shut up for 10 years. It was once Mistress Craven's garden, and after her death, Master Craven locked its door and buried the key.
Mary begins searching for the secret garden as soon as she leaves the manor. She first explores the kitchen gardens, and over one of the garden walls, sees a robin redbreast, whose lovely appearance and cheerful song please Mary deeply. She feels certain that the tree on which he is perched is in the secret garden.
In one of the kitchen gardens, Mary comes across a gruff old gardener named Ben Weatherstaff. When she mentions seeing the robin, the old man breaks into a beautiful soft whistle. Mary is terribly surprised, as the sound is so at odds with his surly appearance. The robin appears a few moments later and lands near the old man's feet. Ben Weatherstaff tells Mary that the robin had been lonely after the rest of his brood flew away. Longing for company, the robin befriended the gardener.
Mary realizes that she too is lonely, and that is one of the reasons for her contrariness. Ben Weatherstaff observes that Mary and he are alike, in that they are both unattractive and have terrible tempers. The robin breaks into song. In an attempt to make friends with Mary, as she has no friends in the entire world, she is almost painfully delighted. Mary attempts to ask Ben Weatherstaff about the secret garden, but he refuses to answer and walks away without a word of goodbye.
All right, readers, I think with that start, let's take a break here, and when we come back, we'll continue our story as Mary searches for the secret garden. You're listening to Novel Conversations. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Novel Conversations. I'm Frank Lavallo, and today I'm having a conversation about the novel The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. All right, readers, when we left, our protagonist, Mary Lennox, was now living on her uncle's estate and is currently searching for the hidden garden locked by her uncle 10 years ago after the death of his wife. And now it's winter in England, which means nothing is growing upon the moor. The landscape seems to mirror Mary's state of well-being throughout the novel. At this point, this winter, she is miserable and friendless, and so the moor itself remains bleak and barren. Mary passes a number of weeks in which each of her days is like the others. She awakens, eats breakfast, and then wanders the moor all day.
Her time out of doors begins to cause a change in her. She slowly begins to grow stronger and healthier. The moor has begun to have a restorative effect upon Mary. She's started, in the words of the book, to wake up. And her imagination, which had laid dormant during her time in India, is quickened by her exploration of the manor grounds and search for the secret garden.
The secret garden continues to be implicitly aligned with Mary. It's been locked for 10 years, and Mary is precisely 10 years old. It remains locked here because Mary herself is still closed off from all human congress and friendship. But we hope that will soon change.
Outside one of Misselthwaite's walled gardens, Mary has a second encounter with Ben Weatherstaff's robin. She is terribly pleased to see him and chases after the robin as he flies along the garden wall. She even chirps and whistles at him, even though she does not really know how. She becomes certain that he lives in the secret garden. She cannot, however, find its door. She said she doesn't know how to chirp like a bird. It's like, is there a proper way to do that, I guess?
You'll say, I feel like Dickon knows.
And
True.
so does Ben Whistlewaite.
Yeah. That night, Martha tells Mary further stories about the secret garden, even though Master Craven has forbidden the servants to discuss it. The garden once belonged to Mrs. Craven, and she and her husband had spent many hours there in the years of their marriage. It had been Mrs. Craven's custom to sit in a rose-covered bower at the top of one of the garden's trees, and one day she fell from it when a branch gave way. She died of her injuries, and after her death, Archibald Craven could no longer bear the garden and had it locked shut.
Hearing this story, Mary feels a great pity for her uncle. As she listens to the wind blowing over the moor, she is able to discern another sound beneath it, the sound of someone, a child, crying. Martha denies hearing any such sound, though Mary doesn't believe her.
The next day, a rainstorm keeps Mary indoors. To keep herself occupied, Mary sets out to search for Misselthwaite's library and to explore its shuttered rooms. Upon entering one of the rooms that open into a corridor, Mary happens upon a collection of ivory elephants. As she knows all about both ivory and elephants from her time in India, she is quite taken with them. Upon going back into the corridor, Mary again hears a child's cry. When she goes off in search of its source, she is apprehended by a furious Mrs. Medlock, who takes her back to her room.
On the following day, the storm has passed, and Martha tells Mary that she is planning to go home to visit her family, as it is her only free day of the month. Mary asks Martha if she might someday visit her family's cottage. Martha is not certain if it will be possible, but says that she will ask her mother. Mary remarks that she likes both Martha's mother and Dickon, though she has seen neither of them. She bitterly adds that she suspects that they would not like her, because nobody does.
Martha asks the girl if she likes herself, and Mary surprises both of them by saying, "Not at all." After Martha sets out for home, Mary goes out into the gardens, where she finds Ben Weatherstaff in good humor. He tells her that spring is coming and that the earth itself is glad. As the two stand talking, the robin appears and lights at their feet. Mary tentatively asks Ben Weatherstaff if anything is still living in the secret garden, and he replies that only the robin knows, as no one else has been inside in 10 years.
Mary wanders off, following the garden walls. She realizes that she is fond of a number of people for the first time in her life. Of Martha, and Dickon, and Martha's mother, and of the robin, whom she thinks of as a person. The robin follows her, and Mary again tries to talk to him and chirps and twitters. The bird leads her to a mound of freshly turned earth, which, when Mary examines it closely, contains a tarnished key that has long been buried. Mary thinks it may be the key to the secret garden.
With the key, Mary determines to search for the door of the secret garden. She desperately wishes to find the garden because it's been locked for so long. If she could only go inside, she thinks, she could invent her own games and play them alone there, and no one would ever know where she was or where to find her. It is this thought that compels her, and the fact that Mary's compelled at all by anything signals quite a change in her character, since she's always been entirely passive, especially during her life in India.
At Misselthwaite, in the fresh air of the moor, she is beginning to be involved in the world around her, and her imagination is reviving. Though Mary closely examines the thick ivy that grows upon the stone walls of the garden, she cannot find the door, and at length returns to the manor. There, Martha announces that her family was thoroughly spellbound by her stories of the child from India. In fact, Martha's mother is terribly concerned about Mary, and has sent her a skipping rope as a present.
Mary goes out into the garden to practice with the skipping rope, and there runs into Ben Weatherstaff and the robin. As Mary is skipping down the path with the robin beside her, a gust of wind disturbs some of the ivy growing upon the stone wall. Beneath the ivy is a door, which Mary unlocks with a key she unearthed the day before. She finds herself standing inside the secret garden.
Inside the secret garden, Mary finds a great many rose bushes that have been allowed to grow as large as trees. The flowerless vines of climbing roses have overgrown all else and make lovely curtains in the air. Since it is still winter, everything in the garden has gone brown or gray, and Mary cannot be certain whether the flora are dead or alive. She fiercely hopes that everything in the garden has not died.
Mary's instantly concerned for the garden's well-being, and she thinks, quote, she did not want it to be a quite dead garden. If it were a quite alive garden, how wonderful it would be, and what thousands of roses would grow on every side. The roses are Mistress Craven's personal symbol, and they're mentioned every time she is mentioned.
Mary feels that the garden is a world all her own, and there might be no one at all alive for hundreds of miles. And yet she is not lonely while she's there. She finds a few green shoots pushing up through the earth, eager for spring. Mary is quite thrilled at the thought that something is still living in the garden, and sets about weeding the space around these early flowers so that they might grow more quickly. She occupies herself with this weeding all day.
Readers, as we've said, the secret garden at this point in the novel is strongly aligned with both Mary and now with the late Mrs. Craven. Since Mary and the garden are so symbolically related, I think the readers and our listeners realize that the reawakening of the garden may indeed foreshadow and affect Mary's own reawakening. This implication is strengthened by Mary's tending of the living garden shoots in the garden. At the same time, this passage subtly condemns Master Craving for letting the garden fall into ruin in the first place. Even if his wife is dead, life must still go on.
That night at the manor, Mary asks Martha for tools to help her in gardening. Martha tells Mary to write a letter to Dickon, who would certainly agree to buy tools and flower seeds on one of his trips to Thwaite, the village nearby. Mary writes the letter and is very excited by the idea that Dickon will bring the supplies himself. She had never expected to see the boy, whom even the animals adore. This also foreshadows the crucial role Dickon will play in the rebirth of both Mary and the secret garden. It is Dickon who will bring her the tools and seeds that she requires to make the garden come alive.
Martha also mentions that her mother has agreed to have Mary visit the cottage, and Mary realizes that she is eager to meet her as well, for, quote, she doesn't seem to be like the mothers in India. When Martha briefly steps out of the room, Mary hears the same far-off crying as she did during the storm. Martha again refuses to admit that she, too, hears the sound and flees the room to avoid answering Mary's questions.
In the week after her first entry beyond its walls, Mary comes to think of the secret garden as a fairy tale sort of place, as a place that is magical and strange and all her own. Each day, she plays with her skipping rope and digs and weeds in the garden in an effort to cultivate the few plants she knows to be alive.
Gregory, the idea of the garden as a fairy tale setting is refined in these chapters. If the garden is a, quote, kind of fairy place, it's not one that causes magical sleep, but rather magical wakefulness. Mary thinks to herself, quote, the few books she had read and liked had been fairy story books, and she had read of secret gardens in some of the stories. Sometimes people went to sleep in them for 100 years, which she thought must be rather stupid. She had no intention of going to sleep, and in fact, she was becoming wider awake with every day which passed in Misselthwaite.
Mary is becoming healthier and less contrary. During this time, her acquaintance with Ben Weatherstaff develops into friendship, and Mary attempts to covertly ask him for advice on gardening. Ben Weatherstaff tells her that he once tended the garden of a woman who loved roses like they was children or robins, and though she died, he still cares for her roses once or twice a year. She continues questioning him about his work with the abandoned roses until he becomes unaccountably angry with her and walks off once again.
After this encounter, Mary follows one of the laurel paths into the woods in search of rabbits. She hears an odd whistling sound, and following it, comes upon a boy playing a wooden pipe beneath one of the trees. The boy is surrounded by animals, including a pheasant, a squirrel, and 2 rabbits. Mary knows him almost immediately as Dickon Sowerby, the famous animal charmer. She is thrilled to see him, but as she is not used to boys, initially feels rather shy in his company.
Dickon tells Mary that he received Martha's letter and gives her the gardening tools and seeds that she had asked him to buy. Mary is very taken with the ease of Dickon's Yorkshire speech, as well as with his ruddy looks and patchwork clothing.
I think it's the looks.
I mean, he does talk pretty funny, too.
Yes, that's true.
After a few moments, the robin redbreast joins the pair beneath the tree. The boy appears to speak to the bird in robin language, asking if he is a friend of Mary's.
Dickon explains to Mary how to tend the seeds he has brought her, and then asks to see the garden. Mary is extremely anxious about sharing the secret of the garden with him. Dickon tells her that she needn't mistrust him, for he keeps such secrets all the time to protect his wild things from the violence of other boys. Mary says that she has, quote, stolen a garden, but fiercely proclaims that it is hers, and she will not surrender it. She does, however, want Dickon to see it, and so she leads him there.
Dickon tells Mary that he had heard of the secret garden from Martha, but never imagined that he would step inside it. He begins to investigate which of the plants are alive. Dickon is impressed at how much Mary has been able to accomplish on her own. Noting how many of the plants are still alive, Dickon wonders aloud if perhaps someone else hasn't been in the garden in the 10 years since Mr. Craven locked its door.
Mary, too, has been utterly neglected, shut in by herself for the past 10 years. And while Mary is becoming rejuvenated by the garden is being rejuvenated by her presence as well. Mary tells Dickon that she wishes to grow flowers that look like bells, in defiance of the nursery taunt that the clergyman's children shout at her. Mistress Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? With silver bells and cockle shells and marigolds all in a row.
That's very sweet, Frank.
Not bad. I remember my nursery rhymes.
Back at the manor house, Mary tells Martha that she has met Dickon. Mary then discovers that her uncle has returned from his trip abroad. Susan Sowerby, Dickon and Martha's mother, had confronted him in Thwaite village upon his return and reproached him for neglecting Mary. Master Craven therefore wants to see Mary immediately as he is leaving Misselthwaite again the following day. Mary is delighted at his imminent departure, but dreads meeting him. She is certain they will despise each other.
Mrs. Medlock leads Mary to Master Craven's sitting room, where they find him sitting before a fire. Mary then sees that he is not precisely a hunchback, though his shoulders are in fact crooked. He would be handsome if not for the terrible misery in his face. He admits that he simply forgot to attend to Mary and asks her if she would like a governess or nurse to keep her company.
Mary fervently declares that she would much rather play on the moor and grow strong before she begins her education. He agrees and asks if there's anything at all that she wants. Mary replies that she wants nothing more than a bit of earth for her gardening. Mr. Craven is quite moved by this request, as it reminds him of his late wife's love of gardens, and tells her that she may have any piece of land she wants, from anywhere on the manor grounds.
That night, the sound of the rain drumming upon the windows awakens Mary. She's greatly miserable at the onset of the storm because she knows that it will keep her confined to the manor house all the following day. Once so awakened, she is too upset to go back to sleep. The wind and the rain sound to Mary like human wails, like a person lost on the moor and wandering on and on crying.
After lying awake for nearly an hour, Mary hears something beneath the sound of the storm. The same cry she heard in the corridor. A child weeping, perhaps? In complete defiance of Mrs. Medlock's command that she keep to her room, she goes off in search of its source. Mary follows the noise through Misselthwaite's darkened corridors until she finds the door to a room in which a light is still burning.
Upon entering the room, Mary finds a thin, curious-looking boy lying upon a massive four-poster bed. The boy is as white as a statue, as though he's been ill and he's crying. Each child is not certain whether the other is a ghost or a dream, and for a long while, they simply stare speechlessly at each other. The boy is Colin Craven, Master Craven's son. He was born 10 years before, in the same year in which Mary was born.
Colin's father cannot bear to see him, as Colin reminds him of his late wife. The boy resembles her and was born only shortly before she died. Archibald is ashamed of how sickly Colin is and has forbidden the servants to speak of him. Colin himself hates to be looked at because he despises the pity and morbid fascination he inspires. Everyone expects him to die. He refuses to leave the manor house and spends all his time shut up in his grand, gloomy room.
Colin does not mind, however, if Mary looks at him, as he is greatly interested in who she is and where she comes from. Mary is only too happy to stay in the hidden room and talk to the hidden boy. Both remind her of the secret garden. When Mary mentions the secret garden to Colin, he begins bombarding her with questions.
To distract him from the question of the garden, Mary asks Colin if he truly believes that he will die. Colin tells her that he imagines that he will, for people have been saying that he won't live to adulthood since his birth. Colin's doctor is Archibald Craven's brother, and it would suit the doctor well if Colin died, since the manor would then belong to him. It was the thought of his impending death that caused Colin to weep.
Colin tells Mary that he wants to see the secret garden more desperately than he has ever wanted anything, and that he intends to make the servants take him to it. Mary anxiously replies that the garden will be utterly spoiled if everyone knows of it. It is glorious because it is a secret. Colin, who has never had a secret before, agrees to keep this one. Mary tells Colin that she will continue looking for the door to the garden, and the two children decide to keep their meeting a secret.
This first meeting between the two children makes it quite clear that they've lived what might be called parallel lives. Both are precisely 10 years old. Both were burdened with parents who could not bear to look at them. Both have passed sickly, neglected childhoods that have left them unbelievably spoiled. And both have been denied and hidden away like secrets. I think the fact that both children have been kept as secrets explains why they decide to keep their meeting a secret and why the idea of a secret garden is so appealing to both of them.
The next day, the rainstorm continues. Mary tells Martha that she has met Colin. Martha was supposed to be guarding Colin's room during the night, but had fallen asleep and thus made it possible for Mary to creep in unnoticed. She is certain that she will lose her position in the house, but Mary reassures her, saying that Colin will not permit that to happen.
Mary tells Martha that Colin wishes to visit with her every day. Martha is astonished. Colin is famous for throwing tantrums when confronted with strangers. She also vows that she will not see Colin if he becomes angry with her, to which Martha implacably replies that everyone must obey his wishes.
A bell summons Martha to Colin's room, where he tells her that he wishes to speak with Mary immediately. Mary agrees, as she actually wants to see Colin, though not as much as she wants to see Dickon. In his opulent room, Mary tells Colin that he reminds her of a child Raja, or a king, that she saw while she was in India. The Raja's servants were obliged to comply with his every command, or they would lose their lives.
Dickon has taught her to love the moor, and she tells Colin that he would too, if only he could see it. Annoyed, he replies that he is far too ill to go out on the moor. Mary is unsympathetic to his talk of illness and death, and tells him that he needn't die, even if everyone expects him and wants him to die. She declares, quote, "If everyone wished I would die, I wouldn't."
Colin thinks a moment and then says that only one person did not seem to think he would die. This person, a great doctor from London, had said that Colin might live if only he could make up his mind to do so. Mary thinks that a visit from Dickon could help Colin make up his mind to live, because Dickon cares so much for living things, for the plants and animals of the moor. The two cease to think of death and begin to talk about Dickon and his family, as well as the coming of spring.
In the midst of their laughter, Mrs. Medlock and Colin's uncle, Dr. Craven, enter the room. The adults are shocked to see the two children together, but Colin, in his Raja-like way, informs them that Mary and he are now friends and will see each other whenever they please. The doctor tells Colin that he mustn't forget that he is ill. Colin, his strange eyes glittering, tells him that that is precisely why he loves for Mary to visit him. She makes him forget his illness.
A number of people, Mrs. Sowerby, the Grand Doctor from London, and Mary herself, expressed the belief that Colin would live if he only stopped thinking about death and made up his mind to survive. This is why Colin says that his forgetting of his illness is the source of Mary's effect upon him. She makes it possible for him to silence his negative thoughts. This chapter also implies that the agents of Colin's rebirth will be extremely similar to Mary's. Mary uses stories of the Sotherbys, the garden, the moor, and the person of Dickon to engage and revitalize Colin, because these things attended her own reawakening.
Mary says that Dickon could help Colin decide to live because he's always talking about live things. Dickon would also make it impossible for Colin to think negative thoughts. To Mary, Colin doesn't seem at all ill when he is amused or engaged in something. Mrs. Medlock, though she is somewhat upset by Mary's subterfuge, tells her that the servants are delighted that she has begun visiting Colin, for he is much less difficult and unhappy. She jokes that Mary is like a second nurse.
After a week of rain and Colin's nearly constant welcome company, Mary is able to return to the secret garden. She flings on her clothes and rushes out to meet the spring with a vigor that she has not previously displayed. In her talks with Colin, Mary has attempted to be cautious in speaking of the secret garden. She's not yet certain whether he is trustworthy. Mary also wants to determine if it would be possible to take Colin into the garden without anyone knowing that she has done so. In this way, he could get the fresh air and sunlight that he so desperately needs.
These things have certainly had a remarkable effect upon her. She's already far healthier and happier than she was when she first arrived. If Colin could leave the manor, Mary thinks he could also enjoy the invaluable company of Dickon and the robin. On the day of Mary's return to the secret garden, it seems as though spring has finally come to the moor to stay. The buds and shoots are forcing their way up through the soil, and birdsong fills the air.
Dickon is already in the garden when she arrives, and he has brought his pet crow, Soot, and his pet fox, Captain, with him. A number of crocuses have come into bloom, and Mary bends to kiss them. As the two excitedly wander around the garden, marveling at all the fresh growth, the robin redbreast appears. The robin is building a nest in the garden, and Mary and Dickon must keep very still, as though they themselves were trees to avoid frightening them. Mary tells Dickon about her new friendship with Colin.
Dickon is glad that he will no longer have to hide the fact of Colin from Mary, since he abhors keeping secrets. Everyone in Thwaite village knows of Colin, but they refrain from talking of him out of pity for the widowed Mr. Craven. Dickon remarks that Master Craven cannot look at his son while he is awake because his eyes are so like his mother's. Colin will never be well, Dickon declares, so long as he thinks of nothing but sickness and death. Dickon and Mary resolve to find a means of bringing Colin to the secret garden.
All right, readers, let's take a break here, and when we come back, we'll visit the secret garden with Mary, Dickon, and Colin. You're listening to Novel Conversations. I'm Frank Lavallo. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Novel Conversations. I'm your host, Frank Lavallo, and today I'm having a conversation about The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. And I'm joined by our Novel Conversations readers, Gregory James and Dallas Stark. All right, readers, when we left, Mary and Dickon were planning, plotting, and hoping to bring Colin to the secret garden. Gregory, do you want to continue our conversation?
Absolutely. When Mary goes back to the manor for lunch, Martha tells her that Colin is anxiously awaiting her visit. Mary replies that she cannot possibly see him at the moment, as Dickon is waiting for her. With that, she rushes back to the garden. Martha warns her that Colin is going to be thrown into a terrible humor if she refuses him.
And in fact, when she returns, Mary's greatly irritated to hear that Colin had nearly thrown a tantrum while waiting for her. Neither of the children is accustomed to considering the needs of anyone but themselves, and Mary does not now see her own selfishness in wanting Dickon's company as Colin wants hers.
Mary goes to see Colin in his room and finds him lying very still in bed. He threatens to forbid Dickon to come to Misselthwaite if Mary elects to spend time with him rather than with Colin. Mary is furious and tells Colin that she'll never speak to him again if he interferes with her friendship with Dickon.
The two have a heated argument about Dickon. Colin calls him common, to which Mary replies that he is an angel, quote, 1,000 times better than a common Raja. This is the first time anyone has argued with Colin in all his life. When Colin reminds Mary that he is going to die, she replies vehemently that he isn't dying at all. He is merely feeling sorry for himself and pleading for sympathy and attention.
Later, Mary finds a number of packages sent to her by Master Craven, waiting for her in her room. There are a number of beautiful picture books and a few games, and a golden pen and inkstand. Mary is delighted that he has remembered her at all. As she is contemplating showing her lovely gifts to Colin, she remembers that he once told her that his hysterical tantrums come upon him whenever he imagines that he can feel the beginnings of a lump on his back.
And he's told her that his nervousness especially happens when he's cross or tired, and Mary realizes that he may have been thinking of his hump and of his imminent death during all the hours he was awaiting her return to Misselthwaite. Mary decides that she may relent and see Colin in the morning.
That night, Mary is awakened by the sounds of screams and cries from Colin's distant room. Initially, Mary is quite frightened by his cries, but grows more and more furious with Colin as his tantrums continue. Colin's nurse rushes to Mary's room and begs her to come and scold him, or at least distract him before he does himself harm. Mary is much amused that all of the adults in the manor are turning to her for help, if only because they suspect she is even more difficult than Colin himself.
Mary bursts into Colin's chamber and, in a childish rage, tells him that she hates him and hopes that he would scream himself to death. Colin is so shocked that he stops screaming and simply gapes at her. He tells her that he is certain that his back is beginning to grow a hump and that soon he will die. Mary scoffs at the idea and demands to see Colin's back. He fearfully shows it to her. Mary, finding nothing whatsoever, tells Colin that his back is perfectly straight and she'll laugh at him if he says otherwise.
This ultimatum has a transformative effect on Colin, who has always been told how frail and doomed he is. Mary's the first to suggest that his illness is, perhaps, largely the work of his imagination. Colin takes Mary's hand and says that he will go out into the fresh air if she and Dickon agree to accompany him. Mary does agree and lulls him to sleep with another story of The Secret Garden.
Mary wakes late the next morning, and Martha tells her that Colin wants very much to see her. He does not, however, command her to visit him, which is a great step for him.
Good for him.
Mary goes to him briefly to tell him that she may have found the secret garden. She then rushes out to find Dickon. Dickon is already in the secret garden when she arrives, surrounded by his wild pets, the fox, the crow, a moor pony named Jump, and 2 squirrels named Nut and Shell.
Aww.
Mary tells him the story of Colin's tantrum, and Dickon becomes even more determined to bring Colin to the garden. Mary replies in a Yorkshire dialect that he and his pets ought to first come to visit Colin in the manor house. Dickon agrees.
Well done.
Back at the manor, Mary tells Colin of this plan. The two speak of their mutual friendliness, for they have always disliked people and been disliked by them. They also speak of how this dislike is changing, for they're growing fond of each other, and of Dickon, and of the robin. Mary then finally trusts Colin enough to tell him that she and Dickon have been inside the secret garden, and that he may go there soon.
Dr. Craven arrives at the manor to examine Colin after his tantrum. Mrs. Medlock meets him in the hall and informs him of the wondrous effect Mary has had upon him. The two adults go up to Colin's chamber to find him sitting up, laughing and talking freely with Mary. Dr. Craven warns Colin that his planned trip out of doors may exhaust him, to which Colin imperiously replies that it will do nothing of the sort.
Mary returns to Colin's room, throws open the windows, and instructs him to breathe deeply the fresh air of spring. She tells him that the air of the moor makes Dickon feel as though he could live forever and ever. Colin is much taken with the idea of immortality, which naturally had never occurred to him.
Mary describes the new growing spring plants for him and mentions that Dickon has been caring for a newborn motherless lamb that he found upon the moor. The two children have breakfast brought to them in Colin's chamber, and Colin notifies the servants, in his most Raja-like fashion, that Dickon and his menagerie are coming to visit him that afternoon.
I love Dickon. He is an angel. Dickon does indeed come, looking very much the animal charmer with his squirrels upon his shoulders, the fox and crow at his heels, and a newborn lamb in his arms. Colin is dumbfounded and made shy by how wondrous Dickon is. Dickon, for his part, is completely at ease, despite how out of place his moorland boots and rough clothes seem in the manor house. The three children speak again of the garden and begin preparations to bring Colin there.
Though a week of windy, chill days delays Colin's first outing, Dickon visits the manor house daily to bring Colin and Mary news of the garden and of the advancing spring. Colin is adamant that the garden's secrecy be preserved, and the three children plan a means of bringing him there without making the location of the garden known at all.
Colin summons the head gardener, Mr. Roach, to his chamber and commands him to keep everyone away from the garden paths and walls, as he intends to go out that afternoon. Roach, speaking to Mrs. Medlock outside Colin's room, remarks upon Colin's regal bearing and casual tone of command. Medlock replies that Mary's influence will temper that tendency in Colin. She will show him that the whole of the world does not belong to him.
During lunch, Colin tells Mary how eager he is to see the spring, as he has never seen it before. Mary replies that, as there is no springtime in India, she too had never seen it before coming to Misselthwaite. Colin's nurse then dresses him, and a footman carries him out in his wheeled chair. He is delighted by the greenness of the landscape and the smell of new flowers in the air.
As they walk toward the secret garden, Mary points out for Colin all of the places she mentioned in her stories of the moor. Colin is enraptured, and his eyes grow larger and larger, quote, as if it were they which were listening instead of his ears. In the garden itself, Colin's ivory skin begins to grow rosy, as though he were being brought to life. He exclaims that he will get well and live forever and ever and ever.
In the garden, Mary and Dickon begin speaking Yorkshire dialect, and for the first time, Colin joins them. Mary and Dickon set about showing him all the treasures of the garden, but hesitate when Colin asks about the great gray tree from which his mother fell to her death. Dickon remarks that roses will soon grow over its bark, hiding the dead wood and making it the loveliest thing in the garden.
By a stroke of magical good fortune, the robin briefly appears and distracts Colin from his contemplation of the tree. Mrs. Sowerby, Dickon's mother, suspects that Colin's mother is somehow still in the secret garden, still watching over her son, and that it is her influence that has brought the three children to the garden. Privately, Mary believes this to be a part of what she calls magic, of the kind that Dickon works on everything that comes near to him.
The rather odd interlude at the beginning of chapter 25, in which we observe the activities of the children from the point of view of the robin, provides us as readers with indisputable proof that the robin redbreast is sentient or conscious with a mind of its own, something we've suspected through most of the novel.
Colin tells Mary and Dickon that he intends to come out with them every day, and that soon he shall walk on his own and be strong enough to work in the garden. Suddenly, the furious face of Ben Weatherstaff appears over the garden wall. He is astonished to see the children in the formerly locked garden.
In his shock at seeing Colin, Ben Weatherstaff calls him the poor cripple and asks if he has crooked legs and a crooked back. Colin is incensed and, with surprising strength, suddenly rises from his wheeled chair and commands the old man to look at him so that Ben might attest to his unquestionable soundness. He then instructs Ben Weatherstaff to join them in the garden so that he might speak with him.
Mary runs out to meet Ben Weatherstaff, leaving Dickon and Colin in the garden. Colin asks Dickon if it is his magic that makes it possible for Colin to stand. Dickon replies that it is not his, but the same magic that makes the flowers grow.
Ben Weatherstaff enters the garden and finds Colin standing quite straight, though he is surreptitiously leaning against a nearby tree. Ben informs the children that he has secretly come to the garden once a year for 10 years, as Mistress Craven had asked him to care for it if anything were ever to happen to her.
Ben, despite the locked door, stubbornly obeyed her orders. Colin announces that it is now his garden, though he will permit the old man to come there as well, provided that Ben keeps the secret. Before the sun sets, Colin ceremoniously plants a single rose to mark the garden as his own.
The garden is repeatedly described as having a fairy tale quality in this chapter. Examples of this include Mary's reading of fairy stories in India, Colin's reading of books, Martha's tales to Mary, and Mary's tales to Colin. Stories, the novel suggests, provide when life does not. There's even an explicit reference to fairy tales. Colin's eyes were as big as the wolf's in Red Riding Hood when Red Riding Hood felt called upon to remark upon them.
Mary, Dickon, Colin, and Ben Weatherstaff spend all their days in the secret garden, observing the progress of the spring. Colin and Dickon engage themselves in passionate study of the growth of the plants and the habits of the animals that live upon the moor. Colin resolves to become a great scientist and begins with a quasi-scientific inquiry into the making of magic.
Colin summons his 3 companions to hear him lecture on the subject of magic. He tells them that there's a great deal of magic at play in the world. One need only harness it. One may see it in the work of the springtime on the garden, since, quote, magic is always pushing and drawing and making things out of nothing. Colin believes that he can call upon that same magic to make him well by fervently repeating what he wishes to happen.
At Colin's word, all 4 sit cross-legged beneath a tree, as though at a prayer meeting. While Colin chants his desires over and over again, Colin then walks about the garden to test his newfound strength, with Mary, Dickon, Ben, and Dickon's many creatures following along behind in a kind of processional. Colin determines to keep his improving health a secret from everyone in the manor so that his new potency will come as a complete surprise to his father upon Master Craven's return.
In the evening, while tending his own garden, Dickon begins to tell his mother, Susan Sowerby, about the new developments at the manor. The 3 children have agreed to let Mrs. Sowerby in on their jealously guarded secret because they regard her as being at least as trustworthy as Dickon.
At least.
Dickon also tells his mother of the elaborate charade being carried on by Mary and Colin. These 2 must do a great deal of absurd play acting so that Colin's improvement will remain a secret. They have, however, encountered a bit of a problem. They have both developed ravenous appetites, but are afraid to eat too much of the manor lest they attract suspicion.
Mrs. Sowerby, much amused by this predicament, decides to send them fresh milk and bread to take the edge off their hunger. Later, Mary and Colin send Mrs. Sowerby some of their pocket money so that she might procure fresh potatoes and eggs for them. They then roast these on the moor.
Dickon asks Yorkshire's champion wrestler for an exercise program to make Colin stronger, and the trio begin to follow this program religiously. Colin grows healthier and more vigorous with astonishing speed, making it all the more difficult to keep up his charade of illness. Ben Weatherstaff marvels at how strong Colin has become and how much he looks like his mother.
Colin says his experiment has succeeded, and he intends to write a book about magic quite soon. Suddenly overwhelmed by the miracle of his own health, he leaps up and shouts that he, quote, shall live forever and ever and ever.
Suddenly, Mrs. Sowerby appears at the garden door, and Dickon immediately runs to her. She is a beautiful woman with gentle, all-encompassing eyes. She wears a long blue cloak that appears very picturesque in the dappled sunlight. She, too, is taken aback by how much Colin looks like his mother. Mrs. Sowerby is full of affection for him and calls Colin lad, as if he were her own child. She also embraces Mary, exclaims of her prettiness, and compares her to one of her daughters.
The children show Mrs. Sowerby every part of the secret garden. Colin and Mary are irresistibly drawn to the warm, supported feeling that she inspires in both of them. Colin asks her if she believes in magic, and she ardently replies that she does, although she doesn't call it by that name.
Mrs. Sowerby says that Master Craven must come home soon, so that he might see the dramatic change in his son. Colin is very touched, and says that he wishes that she were his mother as well as Dickon's. She embraces him and tells him that his own mother is present in the garden. Mrs. Sowerby's way with children is presented as being uncanny. She is a child charmer, as Dickon is an animal charmer. The narrator remarks, quote, "It seemed as if she understood them, Colin and Mary, the way Dickon understood his creatures."
And the omniscient narrator notes the way in which both Colin and Mary have changed their negative thoughts to positive ones and have flourished as a result. The narrator also says that only the courageous are able to do this. Master Craven, by contrast, has not been courageous and his mind is still full of his grief.
The narrator finds Master Craven in the Austrian Tyrol, having, quote, forgotten and deserted his home and his duties. At first, the natural landscape does nothing to soothe his anguish. Then his eye comes to rest on a cluster of flowers and forget-me-nots, and he finds himself marveling at their beauty. Looking at them, he feels almost alive.
Back at Misselthwaite, the garden too is coming alive, and Master Craven is coming alive with it. His body and soul begin to become still stronger during his time in Italy, at Lake Como, where he goes after his departure from Austria. One night, he dreams of the Mistress Craven. She's calling his name and asking him to come to find her in the garden.
The next morning, he receives a letter from Susan Sowerby, advising him to come back to Misselthwaite at once. He must see Colin, she says, as his late wife would want him to. She does not explain why. Archibald immediately makes preparations to return home by rail. On the journey to England, Master Craven muses about his son and his history. He thinks of the way he has neglected Colin.
He thinks of the way Colin's eyes are so like and yet so horribly unlike his mother's, and it fills him with aversion. And yet, he remains serene and resolves to at least try to rectify his relationship with his son upon his return. Master Craven is much pleased by his return to the moor and stops at Susan Sowerby's house to make a tiny gift to her children.
At the manor, he immediately sets off for the garden to look for his son, as Mrs. Medlock says that he will find Colin there. He's astonished to hear sounds of children running and laughing coming from beyond the secret garden's wall. Suddenly, the door is flung open and Colin tumbles out into his father's arms.
Master Craven, ecstatic to find him healthy, embraces Colin and asks his son to show him around the secret garden. Colin does so and tells him the entire story of its discovery and its reawakening. The three of them, Colin, Mary, and Master Craven, walk back to the manor house. Each and every person is utterly astounded by Archibald's happiness and Colin's vigor now that it is no longer a secret.
And readers, so ends our novel, The Secret Garden, though maybe not so secret anymore. All right, really good insights, both of you. Let's take a final break now, and then we'll head into our last segment, where I'd like to ask the two of you to share a moment or a character perhaps that we haven't had a chance to talk about. You've been listening to Novel Conversations. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Novel Conversations. I'm Frank Lavallo, and today I'm having a conversation about The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. All right, Gregory, Dallas, before our break, we ended our story, and now I'd like to ask the two of you to share perhaps a moment or a character or a quote that we really haven't had a chance to talk about yet. Dallas, do you have something you want to read for us?
Yes, I do. I have this quote. It happens when Dickon brings his menagerie of animal friends, and Colin's amazed to see everything. And in the book it says, but Dickon did not feel the least shy or awkward. He had not felt embarrassed because the crow had not known his language and had only stared and had not spoken to him the first time they met. Creatures were always like that until they found out about you. And I kind of feel like Mary and Colin are creatures to Dickon in the same way that the animals are. They're innocent living beings full of life, and you just have to learn their language, learn how to talk to them, and reciprocate the same things.
That is a great quote, a great moment. Anyone can be befriended if we can speak their language.
Yeah, I like that.
Very good. Gregory, you got something?
Yeah, mine's more just general theming and the writer's style. I know that it's from the perspective of the narrator, and it kind of flows in and out of Mary's perspective in a lot of ways. And Mary is almost the narrator in that way. And you would think that you would have an untrustworthy narrator in a 10-year-old child, but I don't think at any point it comes across as being that these things aren't truly happening. We completely trust her.
I never
entire time.
not trusted what she was telling us.
100%. But I do think as they start to introduce the idea of magic, even though the reader understands it as being a positive energy mantra and exercise, there's obviously tangible
For Mrs.
things doing it.
Sowerby,
Right.
Probably a Christian imagery or ideology.
Sure. But I think it's the perfect time where they introduce an adult into the situation. So I think the introduction of Ben Weatherstaff to the children's goings on in the garden just reinforces that all of this is really happening, and that magic or not, everyone has been completely trustworthy up to this point, and we can enjoy it even more so from there.
And even we could trust the magical Robin.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. He's my favorite character. The Robin is my favorite character.
All right, so we get the adult and we get the Robin.
Mm-hmm.
Great stuff, guys. Thank you both very much for coming in and having this conversation with me today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'm Frank Lavallo. You've been listening to Novel Conversations. I hope you soon find yourself in a novel conversation. Thanks for listening to Novel Conversations. If you're enjoying the show, please give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us on Instagram at Novel Conversations. Follow us to stay up to date on upcoming episodes and in anything else we've got in the works. I want to give special thanks to our readers today, Dallas Stark and Gregory James. Our sound designer and producer is Noah Fouts, and Grace Sienna Longfellow is our audio engineer. Our executive producers are Bridget Coyne and Joan Andrew. I'm Frank Lavallo. Thank you for listening. I hope you soon find yourself in a novel conversation all your own.
This podcast was produced with the support of the Ohio Motion Picture Tax Credit and in partnership with the Ohio Development Services Agency.